Midway USA has a huge selection of rifle scopes, plus all the necessary scope rings, bases, mounts, and scope mounting tools to get you on target quickly. We've also got shotgun scopes, pistol scopes, red dot sights, and night vision and thermal imaging optics to serve a variety of different applications. Our offering of weapon lights and laser sights supports a variety of self-defense and target scenarios. Hunters and long-range shooters will appreciate our wide selection of binoculars, rangefinders, and spotting scopes from all of the top brands. For just about everything for shooting, shop MidwayUSA.com.
Hey guys, this is Melissa Bachman. Are you ready to stop spooking deer before it's even time to hunt them? Then you need the new Flex S Dark cellular trail camera from SpyPoint. With a no-glow flash option, long-lasting solar power, and a ton of settings that can be changed anytime through the SpyPoint app, there are no more excuses for letting your deer get wise before the season even starts. So check it out for yourself and see why the SpyPoint Flex S Dark is the unstoppable and undetectable scouting tool you need for your next hunt.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bow Hunter Chronicles podcast, brought to you by Huntworth Gear. For all types of weather, all types of terrain, all types of budgets, it's clothing that just works. Check them out at huntworthgear.com. And it is finally here, the Patreon deer camp. And if you guys are listening to this in real time, you may be driving up to deer camp as we speak. So really, really looking forward to that. There's already a couple guys up in camp, and really can't be looking forward to that anymore. Publishing this, waking up, taking my daughter to school, and getting a couple odds and ends taken care of and heading up there. Already done some of the legwork, so it's just kind of getting up there and getting things situated. Guys are already posting selfies from the tree, kind of getting all of that fun stuff out of the way. Really looking forward to it. Tons of stuff came through. Huntworth, they sent us a package of stuff to give away up there at camp, and then they came through and said, hey, do you want any of this other stuff we got laying around? They sent us something like 70 pairs of gloves. So I have Huntworth gloves coming out of my ears. So we've got tons of that stuff. Latitude sent us a boatload of stuff. Big Shot sent us a target. Zinger did, and Kanadi did some fun stuff with some parameters as far as like what guys bring to camp and things like that. So really looking forward to it. And the guys that support the show are supporting us wholeheartedly in camp as well. Austin from Genesis 3D, he's going to be up there. He always brings a myriad of stuff to throw out on the table. So it's just going to be a great experience to go share camp with a lot of the guys that support the show and give back. So really, really looking forward to that. We have been keeping track of guys throughout the country, guys that listen to the show, all that. We've been trying to keep track of everybody that's harvested deer. So you can go over to the Bow Hunter Chronicles opportunist page on Facebook. There is a form on there, so you can report your harvest, and we're kind of going through there right now. What we've got reported already this early into the 2025 season is 18 animals, and that doesn't include the elk that we're talking about today. I know that Todd Steen has killed a buck in South Carolina that's not on here, amongst a couple of other ones, but pretty exciting stuff. And one of the Clark boys, of course, is on the board again. Ben killed a buck, I think last night or maybe the night before, but and those kids are just absolute killers. But it's fun because, what we've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those are bucks, and the rest of them are does. And that's kind of what we wanted to keep track of on here because, one of the things talking with Josh Arbogast, Jordan Hoover, talking about balancing the herd out and stuff like that, we just kind of wanted to see what it all really did shape up with, as far as that goes, buck versus doe harvest and all of that. So just wanted to kind of keep track just for fun. And Barefoot Dave, he did shoot another buck, so we got another one that hasn't been reported on here either. But again, fun stuff to keep track of. And one more thing. So from Latitude, that Method 3, if you go over to the YouTube for Rome Syndicate for the filming and stuff that we've been doing, there's a little review on the Method 3 saddle, kind of like my first impressions from my first couple sits. So you can check that out over there on the YouTube. But today's podcast, we are talking with Tom Taylor about his opening day bull. He killed his first bull elk with a bow 45 minutes into this year's Montana elk season. So we talk about like kind of like strategy, kind of like historical elk hunting, how he feels like there's no tips or tricks or strategies. It's kind of everything's been done before. And that sort of stuff, but there's some really great information in there, just about hunting in general, and kind of like hunting your hunt, kind of like owning it. And I know you guys are going to enjoy this. It's a fun conversation. And as always, thanks for listening. Yeah. So you go from Michigan out to Montana, but like what, so what was the story behind that? You growing up kind of chasing big game animals since you were a child, right? Basically.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I grew up like, I don't know, any young man that is in a, in a close proximity of somebody that likes to whitetail hunt a lot, so mine just happened to be my father and his buddies, and my mom was always very supportive of all that. So there was a lot of leeway there for my dad to spend a lot of time hunting, and he didn't grow up hunting or in a hunting family. He actually he got into it, I would say probably early 20s, late teens. He probably started dabbling around in it. He was always very outdoorsy. He was a big fisherman. And then he just got really hooked on archery, and then started building his own bows for a lot of years. And he pretty much only really ever traditional hunted. I don't know as if he ever used a compound, or maybe he bought one time and had some issues with it and just said, the heck with it, I'm going to build my own bows, kind of thing. So he was very, very passionate about it. And, yeah, I just grew up chasing everything with a traditional bow, and I absolutely ate it up at a young age. And that's a good way to live. Good way to live when you're young, and lots of energy, and got somebody that builds arrows, and so you can let them fly.
But I mean, maybe that's typical for you because that's, what you knew. So that's one of the things where, you grow up in that environment, that's what you're going to see. But from like a whitetail background, like the bigger game animals, you and I have had hours and hours of discussions about,
Mm-hmm.
archery, traditional archery, and all the different things. But, bigger game, bears, moose, elk, any of the Western style hunting, Alaska type hunting, like wilderness style hunting, when or why or how did that come into play?
My dad had some really close friends that were, pretty diehard, and they started planning trips out west. Eventually I got of age where I could start joining them. And, I think my first out west hunt was, I was 14. And that was an elk hunt, a DIY public land, elk hunt. Get this, I think my used tag was back then, it was like $100 some or something. I don't know. It was really cheap. And, yeah, it might have even been cheaper than that, but the tags back then, I think even for my dad were way cheaper. But, so yeah, when I was 14, I went out there and just absolutely got hooked. I mean, I was head over heels, into anything outdoors as far as hunting and fishing. I just, and when I say just like any kid that grows up with a family that's into that stuff, that's not abnormal. Kids are into that stuff. Your daughter's into that. How many kids do you know that just absolutely hate it, don't want to go out there and do anything? They may not have the patience to stick it out very long, but, so I feel like that's pretty normal when a kid grows up with a parent or a uncle or somebody in the family, somebody close to the family that's very passionate about hunting or fishing or whatever. I feel like that's just kind of a normal upbringing, um, when you're around somebody like that. But, yeah, I remember so I'd been whitetail hunting. I shot my first deer with my longbow when I was 9. Um, I missed a whole heck of a lot of them after that. And, just like anybody else does when they're starting out. And I was just chasing anything I could fling an arrow at legally. Um, and then my dad takes me out to Colorado. Um, and we got into some bowls right away, and I heard my first bugle, and I was pretty much set. I mean, the landscape, the just how big everything was. For a kid that wants to see over the next hill, that's prime addiction territory right there. So, yeah, I was hooked pretty quick. And I think that year I shot a mule deer doe with my recurve. Um, I told my dad I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I think I went back out one more time when I was 16. And, then the next time they went out, I aged out. I was 18. He said, I'm not buying you a tag anymore. You're going to have to pay for it yourself because I had a full-time apprenticeship job at that point. And, he said, you're not getting use tags anymore. You're an adult. You're paying for your own tag. And that pretty much put a halt to, if I had managed my money better, um, I spent my money like I hated it. I wanted to get rid of it as fast as I could. When I was that age, I was an apprentice, so I thought I was making real awesome money, and I spent most of my money as fast as I could and didn't save it for tags. So I missed out on Alaska. I missed out on a lot of Canada trips, Wyoming trips, and stuff like that because my dad said, "No, you're paying for your own tags." Well, it wasn't until years later when my wife said she wanted to go out west for our, I think it was our 10th year anniversary, 15th. I don't know what it ended up being. It was going to be our anniversary that year, and she said she wanted to go out west on a antelope hunt. And that's when I started getting serious again about, um, it wasn't lost on me the opportunity I had in front of me. So I was, very much aware that I needed to start saving my money better so I could afford us to go out west. And, I remember I sent her some pictures. My dad had been out Wyoming antelope hunting a bunch, and he was always sending me pictures. And so I sent her some pictures of, the terrain, the places he's hunting, just pictures he was taking when he was out there. And it's just all sagebrush country, and she says, "Oh, I don't want to go there. I want to go to the mountains." And I'm like, "Well, don't live in the mountains. What are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, what lives in the mountains?" I said, "Well, we can go elk hunting." She said, "Yeah, let's do that." And I said, "Okay." And um, that pretty much started our addiction to the West. Once I took her out there, the mountains kind of set their hooks in her, just about as hard as they did in me. And, it was pretty much game over at that point. Every time we went out, we made a pact that we were going to do that every single year. We were going to go elk hunting every year, wherever we could. We were just going to save the money up and, just do it. And every single year I could see it set in her harder and harder and harder. She was getting more and more hooked with the idea of wanting to spend more time in the mountains. So, Yeah.
Yeah, that's really fun. Like the way that you guys have done that and watching you over the years, and I think that that's even like a bigger part of this kind of story for me. Kind of watching it play out for you to get this bull this year. Um, but like back in those early days, like when you were young and you went out those 2 times with your dad, you know, you're around the same age as me, so we're talking like 30 years ago,
Hmm.
roughly give or take.
Yeah.
So, there's no YouTube, there's no born and raised, there's no, maybe you got VHS tapes or probably some cassettes of elk calling or stuff like that. So when you went out there, like what was the tactics or how were you guys hunting at that time?
Same tactics. Same tactics. It's nothing new. I mean, there's new fads. There's new, you know, I don't think we give enough credit to the guys before us, um, how well they had it figured out, and how willing, the hunting community back then was willing to write books, hold seminars. You'd go to the archery shop and next thing you know, there's 20 guys on one night standing around talking about tactics and places and things they're doing. And we just have it at our fingertips now. We don't have to go down to the archery shop or we don't have to go down to Monday Night League. But, I, I honestly think, I don't think we give those guys enough credit to how not much has really changed. It's when we were out there, my first year when we were not elk hunting, my dad was very aware of the fact that um, we were gonna make certain noises, we were gonna make certain moves due to the wind. Um, Things were gonna hold the bowl up like a creek, like a meadow. He was very aware that I mean, I'm not kidding you. It's the same exact style and way we hunt still. And all these YouTube videos and everything, all these tactics, these new calls, these tips and tricks and all that kind of stuff. And what it boils down to is, um, you just gotta, you just gotta get the right wind and be in the right spot and mess it up a lot. That's just, it's the same thing, man. It's not, it doesn't matter. I don't care how many YouTube videos you make. You gotta have a little luck on your side. I don't think anything's really changed that much.
I don't know. I hear you say that, and I don't disagree with you. Maybe for the tactic and stuff like that. Reason I was asking just because of 30 years ago there was no Onyx, so you're using actual maps, compass, to
Hmm.
figure
Yeah.
this stuff out. Like
Yeah.
now, and we've all done it. If you've been out west, it's blatantly obvious, and you're thousands of miles away looking at a map saying, okay, well, I want to go to this drainage. I think that this looks like this. And as the imaging gets better, you're making plans of like how you're going to get there, what you think you can, I can traverse this, I can't traverse that. This looks like a logging road. That looks like, and then you go to find somebody that's been there, and they tell you what you can and can't do. Where, back in the day, maybe you did know a guy who'd been out there and he told you what you could do, but there was no imaging, there was no waypoints, we weren't sending pins, in the
Right.
same manner.
Yeah, but
Um,
you're still looking at paper
so that
maps.
sort of stuff is like, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and what's funny is that that's what John and I did when we went to Idaho the first time is I printed out a map, like
Hmm.
4 by 6 or whatever, and we sat down with an old boy and circled it with a pencil, and
Yeah. Yeah.
we did mark it out, but looked at it. So
There's a lot of guys that
it's
still
just
do that.
interesting. But you say, yeah, but you say like, you have to have luck on your side. And you got to mess it up a lot. But I don't know any uh, flatlander, I guess, that just goes out and gets into as many encounters as you and Sarah do. And I don't think that that's just you guys have all of this luck. But the way in which you go out there and you hunt, I don't know that I know anybody that goes out there and does it kind of like that way. But going back into like you guys saying that you're going to go out there every year and you're going to, make a pact, you're going to just keep going and going and going. You're getting experience under your belt. You are getting a lot more opportunities to mess it up, pound for pound more than the average guy who goes every other year or every 3 years
Oh, for sure.
or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But so one of the things that I find interesting is that like it seems, if I can remember correctly, she's always kind of been the shooter from the start, right?
Yeah, I mean, 99% of the time, if not 100% of the time. Yeah, she's out front. I'm calling. At this point, I think she cow called a couple times, just this last time we were out hunting. And I got really nervous because I thought she sounded very realistic. I thought there was a cow right by her. And before that wasn't the case. It was pretty brutal when she'd blow on the call. Um, and she said that she's been practicing, and I've been messing with her for the last couple of years. Like, hey, you could practice up on those calls a little bit. I wouldn't mind being out front one of these times, just picking on her a little bit. I don't care. I just have fun being out there, but, uh, yeah, she let out a couple cow calls and I got real excited because I thought there was a cow right on top of her. And then I see her take the diaphragm out of her mouth. So at this point, I think she's just lying to me. I think she can use that call. She just enjoys being shooter all the time. So she's not gonna. So yeah, I'm pretty convinced she's lying to me at this point.
So let's talk about some of those like early hunts, like with you and her out there. Like the first time you guys went out there, what year was that?
Oh, geez. I don't even know. It's 8 years ago. Um, what's that? 16, 2017, 2017. Yeah. Somewhere in there. What a
Okay.
nightmare. Yeah. I mean, just, we got into them. I mean, that was, I don't know. I just feel like if you're the type of guy that, there's just a lot of guys out there that are really good at just recognizing where game likes to hang out. And, um, and I think those guys, I think I'm one of those guys. I'm not a big buck hunter. I'm not like this, you know, I don't have a bunch of points on my wall. I don't have a bunch of inches on my wall. Um, but I don't struggle usually to get into game. And I've recognized that in a lot of other guys. There's some guys that are just really good at recognizing when they're in the right spot. Um, so I kind of have always had that down. I would say most of that's probably my upbringing and just the guys I was around. A lot of that probably just rubbed off on me. Um, but we did not have an issue getting close to elk, but seeing them was a different thing. It was very much they were going the other way when we got close to them, or we weren't aggressive enough. We'd hear them calling and talking, and we were trying to stalk in on them like whitetails when we should have been. Um, elk hunting's very dynamic. You know, whitetails, elk archery, elk hunting affords you affords you the opportunity to go slow one moment, go really fast the next moment, go slow again. It's a lot of very dynamic changes. Um, and we were doing exactly the opposite thing we should have been doing the entire time, you know. 1 minute we're going slow, we should have been going fast. Next minute we're rushing right in on them. blowing them out of there. I wasn't real good on calls, so that wasn't working real good for me. It was a really good, lesson in, oh yeah, you've lived in Michigan your whole life. You know, you're not 14, 16 years old anymore. You can't run up and down these mountains like you used to. Even though I was in pretty good shape compared to what I am now. It's, you know, that's why I always tell guys when they want to go out elk hunting, um, a lot of guys I talk to, they want to know where the elk are, and they want to know, they want to have like some sort of, uh, they want to have some sort of illusion that they're going to have like a good chance at getting one. And you really, like your first couple times elk hunting, you just kind of gotta realize that you're probably just going to put a tag in your pocket and you're going to go walk around in the mountains for a little bit. And you're going to learn way more struggling like that than you are somebody telling you where to go, somebody telling you what to do. I almost feel like that does you a disservice because, um, it just, you're not going to learn that much if somebody just says, yeah, I ran into a bunch of elk in this drainage, and you go out to that drainage and there's a bunch of elk there and you hunt them for the next 10 days. I think you'd be way better off going to a place going, crap, there's no elk here. Now I got to move. Now I got to actually find them. Now I got to, you're just learning so many more lessons than you are if somebody just put you on them, you know? So that was definitely the first trip we took out there was, it was a realization that we needed to be a lot more mobile. We didn't want to be stuck to the truck camp. The next year we went out, we were completely mobile. We went backcountry. We hunted from the road system. We got in shape. We went absolutely bonkers. We screwed it up so many times. I think that trip in particular, it was 12 days. And I think, I mean, the numbers of encounters we had at full draw that year, was pretty insane. Um, and it was quite obvious that we were doing something wrong in the setup in the final moments. That's always kind of been I think that's most everybody's hiccup with archery elk hunting is that the final moments. But it was very apparent to me that we were missing something in the final moments. Um, and it just wasn't, we weren't able to get arrows off. And, you know, and then every year after that, we just kept getting a little closer and tightening up our setups I'd say, you know, after 8 years of hunting them, I'd say we're up to like maybe, you know, 1% of the time them working out the way we want to, you know, where you're at a full draw and you had an opportunity. It might have been an elk that wasn't legal or a cow you don't want to shoot or something like that. But, I don't think people realize when you hunt them in the timber, in the thick timber like that, um, how hard it is to get an arrow in them. It's finding them really is not that hard. Um, you know, communicating with them, um, really isn't all that hard. It's the very final moments that are going to get you. You know, it's just like you found that out trying to kill a deer, picking up a traditional bow and trying to get drawn on a deer and get one killed. And, um, it's those final moments most of the time that really mess you up. And I think that's pretty exaggerated with archery elk hunting in the thick timber like that. You usually where you run into a lot of elk, they're in there because they know they're safe in there, especially after the pressure hits after the first week of seasons. Pressure has been, you know, digging them into these hidey holes and you can have elk within 10 yards of you and you can't tell if they're legal. You can't, you know, you might have a clean wide open shot, but you can't, it's all the other pieces of the puzzle that just do not come together for you. And, that happens a lot, as you know, from, my stories.
Yeah. And so, like, how long did it take for you guys to loose an arrow? And then, I mean, I think it was, if I'm remembering correctly, you had a year that was like Wyoming that was just like a
Yeah.
devastating year.
Yep. Yeah. It was pretty devastating. Yeah. That was, equipment failure due to my, um, laziness, I would say. But, our, our third year, I think it was our third year, I believe, um, I stuck a cow, with my longbow. I hit a limb, gut shot her. Um, and then we searched and searched and searched, and we spent the entire next day looking for her, trying to listen for coyotes and birds, and trying to get down drainage of her and smell her in the morning. And, cause it was early season, it was pretty hot out. I figured I'd smell her if we got downwind of her. Um, we never did find her. And then, I think the fourth or fifth year, I don't know. We had, I think Sarah maybe, in between there, probably fifth year, or fourth or fifth year, somewhere in there. Um, she missed, she hit a branch and missed an absolute giant bull. To this day, the biggest bull we've ever seen. He was well over 300 inches, in Colorado. At 15 yards, she hit a branch. She was absolutely devastated from that. That one still haunts her in her sleep. That scenario played out exactly like it was supposed to for once. Everything went exactly to plan. That scenario taught me more about elk hunting than, a lot of the other encounters I had, because that one actually went how I had planned it. And I still to this day think back on the tactics we used, and also the things that we did that I didn't know. Um, I say tactics. They're not really tactics, but the method that we used to call him in, and the method that we chased that herd down. We hunted that herd on that one mountain for like 6 straight days. We had that bull inside a bow range 2 dozen, 3 dozen times. He just had a big herd of cows, and, his cows kept messing everything up, but they got dug into this one area on the mountain and they just wouldn't leave it. Um, and it was very difficult to get an arrow off in there. And then, um, yeah, that one there taught me a lot, because I think about back a lot of times about what happened on that one. And I realize now why that
So talk
went
about
down that
like,
way.
yeah, so talk about a little bit about what you did there. I mean, because I'm sure that would
So,
help. I mean, again, this is always self-serving for me. Like, so
yeah, so that one in particular, I didn't know it at the time, but I'll explain it in the way that I understand it now at this present moment. That one in particular. So first things first, there are areas that you'll get into sometimes. Not all areas are like this. Um, there are areas you'll get into on some mountain ranges where, you, you can pressure elk pretty hard, and they'll dig in and they won't leave. They'll change their behavior. They'll shut up. Um, they'll, you know, they get a lot harder to kill after they get a lot of pressure in there. But for some reason, I've now understand that there are some of these little, home bedding areas where, I think what it is some of these older cows know that they're almost untouchable in some of these spots. It's everything. It's wind, it's cover, it's feed, it's water, um, so we had one of those spots on our hand. And not all places are like that. Sometimes you can bump a herd of elk once and they go to the next town, you know. But there are some places like this, and we had found one of those places. I couldn't believe how much those elk were letting us pester them, and we were very aggressive back then. Um, we were, we were kind of, we were in good shape, and we were hunting under the mentality of like, you know, I've said it to a couple of my buddies before. I kind of and I just said it to Sarah again here a little bit, but um, I'm not just going to let them live in there for free. They're not just going to get away with that. You know, I'd rather go in there, blow them out of the country and go find something else and learn a lesson and go find something else. Then, in Colorado, there was a lot of pressure and there's a lot of really good country to hunt. It wasn't very hard to find more little honey holes like that. So we would run into a lot of those little honey holes and we'd just go through there burning them out of there. Well, in this one particular spot, they were almost unkillable in there. Um, and we were pressuring them hard. I would play that a little differently now if I had the chance to do it again. I'd be a little more conservative at times and a little more aggressive at other times. But so what we had was this bull had a very big harem. He probably had about 30, 40 cows with him, and there was a lot of pressure in that area. There was a lot of other guys bugling at these elk, and I cannot tell you how many times I listened to the same guy with the same um oh, what is it? I forget what the brand name of it is now, but it's very,
Terminator.
yeah, something like that. It's very noticeable when you hear it on the mountain. They all sound the same. Um, he wouldn't leave that thing alone. And, you know, the elk could just constantly continue to push and stay, a couple hundred yards away from him. He'd catch back up to him. He'd bugle at him again. They'd push another 200 yards out. Um, I wanted to do that guy a favor and chuck that bugle tube off the mountain on him. So he probably had a pretty good chance of killing those elk because cause he could hike. He could hike. He was keeping up with them pretty good, but he was running them around in circles pretty bad in there. Um, but what would happen is they drop down to feed at night and we'd hear that bull. Um, a lot of times when you hear a bull in the morning bugling and talking a lot, it's because he has his cows, and whether or not the cow's just moving and heading back to bedding has kind of got him irritated. So he's talking to him, he's bugling, he's being vocal, or there's a couple satellites around harassing them while they're moving. That's kind of the time when the satellites capitalize, is when they're moving from bed to feed or feed to bed. Because there's a little bit of confusion there. I think those satellites kind of know it. Once that bull gets them into bed, once those cows all bed, the bull doesn't take them to bed. The cows go bed and the bull is just getting drug along. But, once those cows get to bed and he kind of has tabs on them, it's a lot easier for him to keep the satellites at bay. Um, and I think the satellites kind of know that. So a lot of times in the morning, this is a very key thing, that I learned years in. You'll hear him bugling and talking a lot of times in the morning, and your first instinct is to bugle back and try to call him in. And 9 times out of 10, you're not going to call that bull in when he's headed to bed unless you're in front of him or very close. Um, he's following his cows to bed, and he's not going to leave those cows very far. And what happens is when he stops talking, that's because the commotion has settled. So the location that you heard the last bugle, and it's like, oh, they went away, they disappeared, they're not talking anymore. The key thing there is to remember where you heard him last, and they're probably bedded very close to where you heard him talk last. Because the only reason he's really talking is because there's commotion going back to bed. Um, and he may be trying to breed a little bit in the process on the way. But once they get back to bed, they're going to settle down and he's not going to talk as much. So usually when you hear him shut up, you kind of want to make a as close of a note of where you heard that last bugle come from. There's a very good chance they're bedded very close to that area. I didn't know that at the time. I kind of thought we weren't able to keep up with them. We were, which happens a lot. Elk are hard to keep up with in the mountains, especially when they're traveling a lot of country. And So what happened was we had inadvertently gotten right in the middle of where I last heard him. And I thought, well, uh, we lost him. He's not talking anymore. I wasn't calling back to him a lot. I was being pretty silent because I'd noticed, this other guy was basically running around in circles by talking to him. So I was just letting him talk and trying to keep up with him. Well, we'd get to where we last heard them, and it was like, man, they were just right here. Now they're gone. Well, in reality, they were probably bedded 150 yards from us, 100 yards from us. We didn't know it. Well, we would sit down mid-morning after the morning action, and we'd always have breakfast, have our snack or whatever in the morning. Um, and then we'd pull out of there and try to go find more elk that are talking. So this isn't, this bull shut up. And in reality, what he did was just be quiet and bed down. I think he left the country. So we bail out of there, go to some other drainage, try to round up some other elk. And what I did that time was we sat down and had a snack. And this is the tactic we use a lot of times now is if we hear elk, shut up on us like that, we will continue slowly into that area with the wind in the right direction and push very close to where we think that they could be bedded down or as close as we feel comfortable without blowing them out of there. We'll sit down and have a snack. We'll let the thermals stabilize. We'll make sure we get our position right. So when the thermals do switch on us, we aren't blowing them out of there. And then you wait for that 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock midday hour, take a nap. I lost you. Can you hear me? There
Yep.
you are. Can you hear? Okay. Um, sit down, take a nap, have a snack, take a nap, give it a few hours. Cause what's going to happen is that bull is talking enough. Um, he's obviously got some cows that are very close to coming into heat, or he has some cows in the harem that are in heat. So he's not going to leave those cows when they go to bed. But at some point midday, especially early season when it's hot, um, he's going to want to get up, probably go get a drink somewhere. His cows are bedded down. He feels comfortable leaving them. He's pushed the satellites off. He feels like it's usually about midday. They're not scared to get back up on their feet and come address a satellite or come check out another cow that's off in off in the wings or go get a drink. So a lot of times you just get close to them like that and you sit down and be quiet. Um, a lot of times you'll hear them just walk right into you. If you're close to a water source or something like that, they'll get up and move around a little bit, or the satellites in the area might, just happen to come across you. Um, but what we did this day was we sat there, had a snack, took a little nap, and around that midday, I, uh, I let out a couple cow calls and that bull just bam answered me back immediately. Well, he wasn't but 100 yards, 80 yards from us the whole time, and we didn't know it. I thought he left the country. Um, he answered me right back. And so what I did was I just cow called him a little bit. He was hung up. He wanted me to come to him. He wasn't going to come to me. So he wasn't super wound up. So I didn't want to just scream back at him and, you know, you can't ramp up real fast on these elk like this midday. You gotta slowly work into that. So I cow called a couple times. I realized he wasn't going to come to me. So what I did was I just raked a tree a little bit. I glunked a little bit. I let out a couple little, um, grunts, growls, and I just painted the picture that I was a satellite over there and I had a cow that I was tending to, and he felt comfortable enough with all his cows bedded to come over there and investigate what was going on. Well, he got to about, which they very often do, they'll get to about 50, 60 yards and they'll hang up on you and they'll be very vocal. They'll get real irritated, but they will not commit to you the last 20 yards to where you can get a shot. And so what I did was I left my wife and I just slowly started dropping back and I just made it sound like we were leaving. And, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll wait. And sometimes this takes a little while, but they'll want to come in there and scent check that area where all that commotion was going on before they commit to just running in there and whooping ass. A lot of times those bulls will want to come in there and just scent check where all the commotion was and just see like, okay, is this cow in heat? What's going on? I've been pestered by hunters this whole time. I'm not running right in there anymore. But once everything's died down, I hear those elk leave. I'll slip in there 15 minutes later or whatever, 5 minutes later, and I'll swing around downwind or I'll walk straight in and I'll figure out what was going on. Um, so that's what I did. I just dropped back and I made it sound like I was leaving, and he slowly just kept coming. He slowly just kept keeping 50, 60 yards out from me. And I just drug him in right past my wife. She was being silent. He didn't know she was there. I just drug him right past my wife slowly and, you know, got him to 15 yards. My wife hit a stick. Her arrow kicked so hard that the fletching actually smacked the bull's belly. We found the arrow right where the elk spun and dug up dirt to leave after she shot. Her arrow was stuffed. He was in like this really mossy, boggy spot, and it was just her nock sticking out of the ground, and it was in the ground at an angle like this. And she kept telling me, she's like, I know I watched the fletching hit him. She's like, I watched my arrow. Well, I think what she saw was her arrow smacking, and she never did actually, pierce hide. She just gave him a good slap and told him to get out of there. So that was it for that. But yeah. Yeah, so looking back on it now, we
That's
accidentally did everything right.
but yeah, I mean that sounds like a lot of learning and kind of it kind of sounds like it helped you in your situation this year to kill your bull a
Yeah, I
little
mean,
bit, right?
yeah, every single year. Um, this is the first year. I would say this is the first year that we have gone back. I would say honestly, what killed my bull this year was going off historical knowledge in an area where we have been a handful of times now and had a lot of really good run-ins. Um, we know travel patterns in there a little bit. We know bedding areas in there. Um, every time we would dive in there, we would learn it a little better. This is the first time in my entire life I've gone into a spot elk hunting with a very, very good grasp at how the elk are moving in there and where they're going, where they're headed to bed, um, where all the wallows are, and not all of them obviously because we found a bunch more again this year, but where a lot of the main wallows are that get hit early season. Um, and it was definitely quiet. Nothing was talking. Now, if I hear a bugle, I'm going to go after it, just like everybody else is. Um, but the difference is this year is when nothing's bugling and you kind of just get frustrated because nothing's talking. Um, and then you resort to just going and hunting through bedding areas and blowing them out of there. What we did this year was we just tried to get in there early, capitalize on areas where we know they go from feed to bed, and we just got the wind right and we just still hunted basically. And we just we allowed that bull I killed to reveal himself to us instead of us revealing ourselves to him. And so we got very close to him. Go ahead. You're going to say something.
Well, I was just gonna say, just because I gotta bust your balls, I can't believe that you didn't just when you were talking about like in your last story of, you know, every place in Colorado doesn't have these places where elk want to be, but this is one of these honey holes. I can't believe
Mhm.
you just didn't give the grid coordinates because Tom prides himself. I'm never going to hunt the same place twice. He
Yeah.
goes, he gets into these situations with these elk and he's like, yeah, I'm not going back there. I got to go see what's over the next hill, all that stuff. And then, this year he says, well, because I went back to the same place where I knew, where there was elk. Like, no shit. Like it seems like a
You
good
don't,
plan.
Yeah, it really is. And I would say it is the best way to kill an elk is to continue to build. It's everything with hunting. The best way to get to know an area is to continue to go back to it over and over again. You up your chances so much, but I don't know what's wrong with me, but I don't know, man. I just want to go find new spots. I always feel like there's a better spot out there. Yeah. Yeah. I'm horrible about that. I'm terrible about it. Some of that is I
But the whole
came from a
time you were like
state.
beating around the bush. The
Yeah.
whole
I
time you're beating around the bush, I'm thinking like, just tell where it is because you're never gonna go back there.
know. Yeah. I know. Yeah. Maybe someday I will. I
Uh,
don't know. I'll have to wait probably to draw that tag now. I don't even think it's over the counter anymore, but yeah. Yeah. You don't even, I
but
don't
yeah,
think
you
you
were saying.
fully understand how hard it was for me to commit to that spot because it's like the area we go out after work when we just got, it's not super far back in, it's within an hour and a half of the house. It's an area that gets hunted a lot by other guys. Um, so in my mind, it's kind of that backup spot that we go to when we don't have enough time to actually go hunt where we want to hunt, you know? So that was tough coming to that spot.
But no, I mean, I totally get it. Like this year, even for whitetail, like I feel like I'm getting, I don't want to say like better, with like figuring stuff out because I'm still the same like haphazard hunter, right?
Mm,
But we got that. I picked up a lease for Frank and I and Stella mostly, but it's just this little piece of timber in all this farm field. And opening day is like uh east wind terrible, and like the old me would just be like, oh, I gotta go there, there's bucks there, blah 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 blah. And I went out to this old uh faithful spot on public land that I know is good for an east wind, for no reason. Like if Frank called me, he's like, why'd you go out there? And I was like, well, there's the east wind, it's just like the spot you go to, like that's where you go,
right.
like
No.
I totally get, like, that's just the spot where you go when you don't have a spot to go.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. 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 I'm horrible about that, dude. I am absolutely horrible about it. I think, you know what it
I don't know.
I think it's a mentality thing. I think years and years ago, I told myself I didn't care what I killed. I didn't care who thought I was a good hunter. I didn't care about any of that anymore. And it got to the point where it was like, I'm just going to do this because I enjoy doing it and I'm going to do it the rest of my life and I'm going to do it the way I want to. Well, the way I want to do it is I want to go find new places all the time. I came from a state where I traveled around so much in that state and seen like 75% of the public land to offer in the lower peninsula. And I had anxiety over like I was going to run out of new spots to go look at. And then I move out to a place where I have the opposite anxiety of I'm never going to ever see it all, so I think that does not help my bad habit of wanting to go to new areas all the time.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess you have a good problem because you don't have anxiety over not killing stuff, so that's good.
No, I don't. I
you know
could give a crap less about that anymore. I like to kill stuff just as much as the next guy,
but
but
all right.
yeah,
No, but that, I mean, so go into the story about like how you actually killed that bull this year because I think that's like super cool, and that's one of the reasons you're like, oh, it's just going to be like such a short podcast, but like like I said, like the way I think that you guys go about it, um, it really does. You say that those old timers, they just do the same stuff that everybody does today, but you know that the dude blowing on the Terminator or whatever, the thing that just goes diddly-diddly-doo, like those
Mm,
things.
yeah.
He was not using the same tactics that you were using, and the way that you hunt and the way that you explain kind of the way that you're calling, sitting down with the old timer that's killed everything under the sun. When we went over there and we were looking at those maps, there's a brown bear rug and a moose and everything.
Yeah.
And he's talking about calling in elk by getting up above them and taking a handful of rocks and just throwing them down the runway, just the slide, so it sounds like there's elk up there.
Yeah.
He's talking
Yeah.
about just breaking some sticks and just he wants to
Yeah.
sound like a spike elk and not like this sort of stuff. So that's why I think the way that you are doing it is not the way that's like quote unquote advertised.
I mean, I do plenty of that too, and I have done plenty of that in the past, but honestly, I think, um, I if we just boil this down to like, if we really simplify this more than it probably should be, I think guys that are good at killing stuff are good at calling audibles and trying new things. I really do. I think they're really just good at rolling with the punches. Um, and they're very good at understanding, um, at a very basic level, what that animal needs and what it's doing to survive out there, and not overthinking it, you know. And I just had a conversation with a guy up on the mountains. His son, he'd been hunting elk for years and years and years, and and he said, one of the guys that was standing next to him, he was a younger fella, and he's like, well, yeah, he used this tactic, and he was saying this tactic's what killed the bull. And I the guy had kind of walked away, and I was talking to the old timer, and the old timer said, everybody thinks there's a tactic. And I said, tell me if I'm correct in thinking this, is there's not really actually a tactic that works every time, or, some new, it's being able to switch things up when things aren't working. And this guy's killed a ton of elk. And he goes, 100%. He goes, if it's not working, don't do it anymore. Try something new. And he goes, and then you have to understand that 3 days from now, that thing that wasn't working might work again. So, and the guys that understand, like why a bull is bugling so much when he's in his bedroom versus why he's there, but he's not bugling, why he understands that there's a cow that's in heat with him. And it's aggravate. It's got him excited. It's got him a little aggravated. She's not letting him breed as much as he wants. There's behaviors, when you talk about whitetail bucks, pre-rut, post-rut, middle of rut, they do different things. Different things work. And I honestly think that the guys that kill a lot of stuff are the guys that fully understand that these animals are going to act differently at different times in the year. And they're not just going to have like these bag of tricks they use and go through them A, B, C, D, E and wonder why they don't work. They're going to apply A here, B here, C here. When that doesn't work, they're going to pull out D, E, F. I think those guys are just really good at understanding, when they do something and it doesn't work, they're good at understanding why at a very basic level, and they're not overthinking it. So, and that's exactly how I killed my bull was I realized that we're early season. These elk are probably going to talk a little bit in the morning. Um, because you got bulls. They probably don't have a hot cow with them yet. They're not going to be fired up. Um, they might talk a little bit in the morning, and when they bugle in the morning, early season like that without having cows with them, they're saying a different thing than they are saying when they're bugling and they have cows with them that are hot. Um, Those are two different animals. You know, it could be the same bull, but it's two different animals. So they're bugling in the morning, early season like that because they're sorting out a pecking order. They're seeing where each other are at. They're sizing up their competition. Their testosterone is spiked and they can't handle it anymore. And they can't figure out why these cows aren't coming into heat yet. Um, that's a different elk than when he has a cow with him that's hot and wants to kill you, you know, because you're bugling at him. Those are two different species, you know. So I understood that early season like that, they're not going to talk like you want them to. You've got to just put yourself where elk are at, get the wind right, spend as much time in the close proximity of elk as you can, and try to capitalize on moments when they happen. And so that's what we did. We just slowly slipped into this ridge system that we know that they crest and they come over and they drop down the north side to bury into this nasty mess to bed in. I figured they hadn't had a bunch of pressure yet. It was opening day. So there's a pretty good chance I was going to catch them on their feet a little bit longer. I was going to catch them off guard. So we slowly slid in there. I waited for that elk to reveal itself to me instead of me revealing myself to it and giving it the chance to make the decision whether it wanted to stick around or not. So we just went real slow until I figured we were going to bump into elk up there at some time because we've bumped elk up there quite often going to and from an area where I thought we had to get right away. So I realized like, hey, we need to just go slow through here and just still hunt through here. They're probably going to be on their feet in here. I heard he snapped a stick at about 80 yards, I'd say. I couldn't see him, but at 80 yards, I heard a large animal pop a stick. My wife
And so when you went up there, like, were you planning on being the shooter, or was she planning on being the shooter, or what was the plan going in?
The plan is, like I say, 99.9% of the time, she's going to be shooter. Now when you're still hunting through an area like that, we have an agreement that whoever gets and whether or not she's shooter or not, whoever gets a clean shot first takes it. But when you're actually doing like a calling setup, which is what you're doing sometimes, she's always set up in the shooter position. So we were just working up there, just side by side. I think, you know, some part of the time she was in front of me, some part of the time I was in front of her. A lot of times when we're walking into an area, I will be in front just because I'll kind of dictate the pace a little bit. She has a tendency, she's a go-getter. So she has a tendency to want to get to an area very quickly. So I have a real hard time slowing her down a lot of times. And then there's other times like just recently there's times when I have to like physically grab her by the back of the shirt and push her forward to go harder. So a lot of times I'll be up front and dictate the speed a little bit. And then she can kind of just trail along, and then she doesn't have to worry about stopping and going, peeking around corners, looking at gaps. I just have her be eyes and ears, and she doesn't have to worry about all that other stuff. We heard a stick pop at like 80 yards. I happened to be in front of her, but she was right there on my heels, on the ridge. You know, we were just going real slow. I turned around, looked at her. We immediately knew what that sound was. That was a large animal popping a stick. She immediately knocked her arrow without me saying anything. And I knew that at some point I was probably going to have to make a call to bring this elk in because it was so quiet. I knew that we weren't going to be able to like stalk up on this animal in this tight timber. At some point I was going to have to get him to come to us. And so I immediately pointed her to swing out in our downwind direction just in case this thing did try to catch our wind. She went downwind. She was maybe 20 yards from us. She didn't go very far. And I heard another stick pop and I just let out a quick little calf call after I heard that second stick pop. And a lot of times the reason why I'll use calf calls is, because it's very, uh, when cows are starting to come into heat, they get cranky, they get ornery, they don't like each other. Yeah, they use each other for safety in numbers, but they don't necessarily want to invite a cow into the group that they don't know. So a lot of times when you sound like an older cow, you'll notice the cows just move away from you because they don't want nothing to do with you. Um, and we have a cow tag for that unit this year. So I just calf called because that's like a non-aggressive call to any elk. You know, bulls are going to be curious about it. Cows are going to be curious about it. Um, so I just let out one single calf call and we waited about 2 minutes and I got to thinking in my head, I was just standing there with my bow at my feet. Um, I didn't have an arrow nocked or nothing. My bow was on the ground and I was just standing there listening. And about 2 minutes passed and I realized that I was being stupid. I was standing behind a very thick section of brushy timber where I wasn't going to get a shot anywhere. And I thought, well, I need to take like 2 or 3 steps around the other side of this. Sarah's got that side. I'll take a couple steps over here. So either way they come in, one of us is going to get a shot. I think I'd maybe covered 2 yards and, knocked an arrow. I took maybe, 2 or 3 steps and I heard footsteps like 20 yards away. And, it's incredible how quiet those big animals can come through there when they want to, but, um, it was definitely quiet. Like every stone we stepped on made a loud noise. But I heard a couple footsteps and there was a lot of low hanging branches in the spot where I was looking. So I just immediately dropped to my knees and I saw the legs of an elk running and I assumed it was a cow. Um, so I just dropped to my knees quick and she wasn't running. It was one of those deals where it was like, it looked like maybe she had caught some movement from me and she was kind of just walking quickly out of there. And she was walking at a different pace than she came in because now she was making noise. And she was headed towards the direction where I had a pretty wide open lane. If she crossed it, I was going to get a shot. And so I just ranged it really quick after I dropped to my knees and I'm like, okay, that's 40 yards. And I pulled my rangefinder down and out of the corner of my eye right in front of me. Um, he had his head down and he was coming through the timber on a steady walk and he was at about 20 yards at this point. And I just saw enough of him to know he was legal, you know, and, and he kept coming at that same pace. Now he's at 15. This is all happening within a second. I get my rangefinder back in my vinyl harness and I realize I got to draw on this thing now or I'm not going to get a chance to draw. Yanked my bow back. He, instead of staying on the trail and coming straight at me, he kind of like sidestepped around this tree. And when he did, he got quartering to me a little bit, pretty hard. He was quartering to me pretty hard. And he's at about 13 yards now. And he heard that cow and he looked this way and I was just getting my pin settled and he turned and looked right at me and I let it rip. I hit him. I tried to hold forward as far as I could. I knew with my setup that I was going to be able to, I didn't want to hit point or shoulder, but I knew if I got scapula or shoulder blade, I was going to be fine. I was going to get enough penetration. And so I tucked as tight to the shoulder as I could. I ended up hitting a little high. It's probably because I either just aimed a little high and it all happened real quick. Or I definitely had to punch some pine boughs to get to him. There was in between me and him those Magnus Stinger buzz cuts acted like a pole saw going toward, they trimmed a few branches on the way. So So I don't know if that deflected my arrow a little bit or not. I knew it was going to get to him. There wasn't anything real big in front of me. It was just real thin, soft material. But I ended up hitting him a little higher than I wanted to, but I knew I got lungs. Like it was a good shot. He was quartering to me pretty hard, so I was a little nervous that I didn't tuck the shoulder as close as I wanted. I was a little nervous about just getting one lung and him running forever. So I was a little nervous about that. Um, he wheeled and ran about 20, 30 yards behind that thick stuff where Sarah and I couldn't see him. And stopped. I heard him stop. Everything was super quiet. I heard him cough some blood out. And then once he coughed that blood out, what I thought I heard was him just bailing off the side of the frickin' mountain. I thought he was going down into that nasty stuff. I thought it was going to be a nightmare. They went forever. Well, it turns out he had only ran 25 yards tops. And where I heard him stand there and cough, he buckled and fell right there. He never thrashed or nothing. He never made a peep. I heard the cough once and he was on the ground, or he was either already on the ground when he coughed, which I find hard to believe because that's a very short time to die, for a big animal. So I can't believe he died so quickly. But this all took like maybe 5 seconds for that to go down, before he coughed and they took off. So yeah, he just died right there. And what I heard was he had a bunch of other elk with him that took off, and I thought he took off with them, but he ended up just dying right there. So.
And so what was Sarah's vantage point from this? Like what was
she
she seeing while you were seeing all of this?
Absolutely nothing. She couldn't see me. She couldn't see any of it go down. She heard it, I don't even think she knew the bull was there. I'll have to ask her that. I'm not so sure she actually knew the bull was there. She just heard me shoot and she heard the whack, the definite sound of an arrow, a broadhead going through her hide. And, yeah, I shot, and the next thing I remembered, he ran off and was quiet, she didn't make a move, I didn't make a move. We just held still and listened, and then they all took off, and once they all took off, I turned to my right to check for her. Well, I couldn't see her, and and about a second later, I see her head poke around the corner. She's looking at me, and she's like, her eyes are this big. She's like, "Holy crap! Did that actually work finally?" So, yeah, yep, yep. She said,
So
I think she said, "Did you hit him?" And I said, "I think I hit him pretty good." And you could see the relief come over her face because we've wounded enough now that, and I don't like telling people that, but I'm not ashamed of it. We've wounded enough now to not get our hopes up. We've had a lot of shots go poorly. And so now when one of us shoots, we're like, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" It's like, we'll ask each other like 2 or 3 times, "Are you sure?" Oh, yeah.
And so what was it? Did it feel any differently than like a whitetail or anything like that? Like walking
Um,
up to it in the
no,
fact that it was a big milestone. You know what I mean?
you know,
Like finally, anything like that?
there was a moment where I was like, finally, that went the way it was supposed to. I think one of the guys in the Patreon group said, "I hope you're celebrating tonight," and, or something like that. And Sarah asked me, she goes, you didn't seem all that excited." She's like, "It's like you just shot another deer." And I just, um, I think going back to that mentality thing, I'd made the decision after 8 years of wounding elk, scaring elk off, blowing up chances, you know, it seems like hundreds of encounters at full draw. I think after a certain point, you get to the point where it's like, you, you know, the end moments don't work out for you. And it's very easy to just be like, what am I doing wrong? Get very frustrated. I've gotten frustrated a ton of times, you know, get very frustrated and you're like, I blew it. I just, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, if you just keep grinding away and you make the decision that I don't care what happens, all the stuff leading up to this is the thing that I find the funnest. And I'm never going to stop doing this, God willing. As long as I got my legs and my health and the opportunity, I'm going to I don't care what the results are. I'm going to chase an elk around with a bow every year, no matter what. And I don't care how it pans out. I'm going to continue to try to get better at it. And when I walked up on that elk, it was like, finally, that went the way it was supposed to. And let's start breaking them down. It was that simple. There was no like overflow of emotions. There was none of that stuff. I think when I changed that mentality years back, where it was like, I'm gonna, regardless of the end result, you know, regardless of the kill or not, because the end result to me isn't the kill. The end result to me is, did I learn something? Did I have fun? Did I enjoy my time out there? Did it make me a better person? Did it make me a better hunter? So I think when you get to that point, when you knock one down, it's just like, yep, that went the way it was supposed to, you know?
Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah, so I'm just looking at my phone here because so one of my buddies, he always says, you know, once you uh, once you fill that tag, like the hunt is over. And I think that for the guys like yourself and you know him for sure, and I'd put myself in that category. Like the hunt is more what we're after than the kill, right? And my dad, you know, he shot his bear up in the UP, and he's just waiting for the processor, and he's coming home tomorrow. But he's been up there, you know, kind of tending camp, you know, kind of like being essentially like camp bitch, just waiting for his elk or his bear to be processed, and you know he's going to pick mine up as well. But I told him, I said, success is boring when the tag is filled, the fun is over, and that's
Right.
like kind of how I feel about it
Yeah.
too. Like the whole thing is like the hunt is the thing, not
Yeah.
the success. It's just you know with that much going into it is you know. But it's funny that
Well,
that
okay, hold on.
wasn't the kind
Hold
of
on a
like the
second.
reaction because go ahead.
Hold on 1 second. Because I remember having this conversation with you when you were talking about you were gonna try killing a bear up on your property up there, and you didn't know anything about baiting and everything else. And I specifically remember having a conversation with you telling you to enjoy learning how to bait, enjoy that process, because I knew I wasn't going to tell you this, but I knew damn well that you were probably going to kill one pretty quick and it was all going to be over with. And if the kill is the part that you find the most enjoyment in, all of that other stuff, you're missing out on all that opportunity to enjoy all that other stuff, you know? So I really do think guys make a mistake with like just trying to rack and, you know, just pile inches up on their wall. And it's like, yeah, but where did you go? Why did you go there? What was fun about how you figured that? You know, it's like all that other stuff to me is way more fun than, you know, don't get me wrong. I want to put an arrow in something just as bad as the next guy. That's the whole reason we're out there. But it's all the stuff leading right up to that moment. You know, once the arrow actually gets into the hide, that's like, that's what's supposed to happen. You know, it's the seconds before that happens and all the stuff before that happens. That's the fun stuff to me. You know, releasing, actually hitting the trigger and letting that arrow go or releasing that arrow. That's like at that point, it's like, now this is just supposed to go the way it's supposed to go. You know, we've done all the good stuff, you know, so.
Yeah. Yeah, well, but like that's what I was gonna say is like, you said, well, it wasn't that, it was just like, oh, cool, like let's break it down. But I feel like, that I feel like we had more of like a I don't want to say it was like a finally, but like we had like a celebration, like on the mountain when we shot that bear, like up
Well, yeah, we did.
in
Yeah.
last year,
I think that was because that
because
was a
that was
little,
cool. I
because
mean,
I think that was because neither of us knew what the hell we were doing. And I think it was like, it was more
so
of like a disbelief of how it all worked out thing. That was like, holy crap. Yeah.
yeah, yes, because some guys just know where game like to hang out, I guess, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, that just
no, but
goes
that's,
back
I
to my
mean,
point.
like I
That
said,
just goes back to
that's
my point of like, you just put yourself around animals long enough and something's going to work out for you. You just got to get in close proximity of them long enough. And even a dumb electrician can kill one.
so I got to ask you because now I'm going to be in the boat. What what have been your favorite bear recipes?
Oh, bear roast. Yeah, by far. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, bear roast
And
is just
how do
good.
you cook that?
So I usually do, I mean, you can throw it in the crock pot. You could throw it in an Instapot if you want. I like to put it in a Dutch oven. Um, and I'll sear it and brown it really good. First, I do all my roasts pretty much the same way with elk, deer, bear, whatever. Um, excuse me. But, so yeah, I'll just sear it on all sides really good. Um, I'll use good bone broth. Um, I don't overly season it at first, just some salt and pepper usually. I don't put onions in it. I think that's key. Do not cut onions up and put it in your roast. I think that's key for your roast, especially with wild game, because my mom, I don't know how true this is. I'm not a chef, neither is my mom, but my mom would always harp on putting onions in your broth and your roast to cook with your carrots and potatoes later when you put them in. Um, she would always tell me don't put onions in your roast because the onions will soak up all the flavor and then your meat will be flavorless. So I don't put any onions in my roast. I think it actually is a thing. If I'm going to put onions in there, I'll just put like dried onion powder for a seasoning in there to get some onion flavor. I won't actually cut up onions and put it in. But yeah, I just sear it, bone broth, salt and pepper, and then I just braise it in that broth, cast iron on the stove or in the oven, for, till the thing's falling apart. And then, before that, just pull it out and put your potatoes and carrots and mushrooms. I really like mushrooms in a roast. I think mushrooms give it a good flavor. And they're really good when they come out. Yeah. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I think
Okay.
there is just the sear, getting a good sear on it and cooking it long enough to be tender.
Well, you got to cook it long enough to be 180 degrees, or you know.
Well, yeah, you cook it for 8 hours.
Well,
Yeah, yeah, but I think bear roast is probably our favorite pot roast. Is bear roast, and I grew up eating bear roast up at Elm Hall every year. I would just tear that bear roast up because guys up there in Michigan would always kill a bear, and they always had like a big potluck one night out of the weekend, up at that traditional bow shoot that my family would go to every year. And, it was kind of like we would go to it every year religiously. It was the one shoot we didn't miss, up in Elm Hall, Michigan. And, yeah, they'd have a big potluck on one of the days on the weekend and everybody just kind of bring a bunch of wild game. And, there was always bear roast. And I just remember that bear roast being so good. And, when I cut mine up last year, I made sure to make a lot of roasts, to cut up a lot of roasts, and I'm glad I did because I love that stuff.
okay. Well, I'm going to have plenty to figure it out. So that's, that's the thing. So, yeah. Well, it's always fun. You got to come back and hunt with us one of these days.
I know, man. I was really trying to swing it this year. Really, I was trying to swing it this year. But I'm paying for taking time off elk hunting right now. Pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, you move out there to be your own boss. You can hunt all the time. And turns out now you're the boss and you got to work all the time.
Yeah.
Funny how that works.
But you know a guy out here now that invites you out here for stuff. So, there are perks to it.
Yeah. He's a terrible guide. I got to find him.
Yeah, I am.
I got to find him game.
I was very clear about that off the rip.
Yeah. I predicted it. I said everybody else is going to leave and then we're going to go kill a bear. It was pretty easy after that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and what did I say?
Well, I appreciate it.
What did I say when we
feel guilty? Or
No. Remember when it wasn't working for us? We weren't really finding many bears, and our plan for that morning had kind of taken a crap. And you asked me what we were going to do, and I think my response was, "Well, I'm going to do the only thing I know what to do when it's not working out, and that's just basically go work hard." And we ended up climbing a very steep hill.
On the tailgate of the truck. Well, we was sitting on the tailgate of the truck because we were going to try and cross this raging river, and that was obviously not working out. And we're sitting there, and you're like, "Well, somebody told me there was a bear track up there once." And I said, "Well, we're not going to kill him from the truck. Let's go."
Yeah, I think we were both kind of like, "Well, we got to do something."
I mean, yeah, we're not going to kill him right here.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it worked out all right.
Well, we're going to have to do that again for elk. But I would, when I come out there for elk hunt, I wouldn't mind going to somewhere that you've been before. So
well,
keep that in mind.
I'm going to have to change plans then because that's kind of, I thought about taking you guys into a completely new spot. Yeah.
Hell, that one spot we went for bear, you called in 2 spike bulls.
Yeah. That's where I killed them out. Up above there, about a mile from there.
Right there?
Yeah, just about, I'd say about 2.5 miles.
Easy.
2.5 miles from there. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you're sworn to secrecy now.
Yeah, let's go there.
Yeah. We need quads.
Well, you just drive up this really big thing and you can see either a bear or a moose over there with 10 by 42s. Then you just got to go look, see if it's over there.
Yeah, they're just standing by the road up there.
But, all right, man. I really appreciate you coming on here and catching up anyways.
Yeah, it's fun.
I know how you like to be sworn to secrecy, but I appreciate you climbing out of your hole for me.
Yeah, that's all right.
All right, thanks, man.
Yeah, you bet.
Join us at a Friends of NRA event where freedom, fun, and firearms come together like nowhere else. With more than 600 events held across the country, there's always one happening near you. From exciting games to exclusive auctions featuring one-of-a-kind firearms and gear you won't find anywhere else. Whether you're a lifelong hunter, a competitive shooter, or simply passionate about defending freedom, there is a seat for you. Visit friendsofnra.org to find an event near you and get ready for a night you won't forget. Bow hunting all comes down to a moment. And in the moment, you want equipment on your bow that will get the job done. Trophy Ridge products are the tools bow hunters trust. React Technology sights, rests, stabilizers, and quivers to help a bow hunter be successful in the field. And those tools are from Trophy Ridge.